afternoon, and welcome to the University of Oregon Lundquist College of Business here in Portland, Oregon. We're delighted today to offer you a panel to focus on where things are going in the area of the supply chain. We have 7 esteemed panelists that I'm excited to be able to introduce to all of you. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Ellen Schmidt Devlin. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Executive Program here in Portland, Oregon, and the Sports Product Management Program here in Portland as well. I spent 27 years at a small company outside of Beaverton, Oregon, named Nike. I had an opportunity to live from Exeter, New Hampshire, to Hong Kong, to Japan, to Bangkok, Thailand, to my final assignment in Busan, Korea. I've been retired for 10 years. And I've spent the last 8 of those years at the University of Oregon, part of that time developing the Sports Product Management Program. Our focus today is a combined effort between the Oregon Executive Program and the Sports Product Management Program to better serve the industry. Our Oregon Executive Program has been educating people for over 35 years in Portland. We have people from across businesses, across industries. It's a 2-year master's program, and we welcome anybody that's interested in it. Our Master's of Science in Sports Product Management is an 18-month face-to-face program in Portland, and we also offer it as a 21-month online program. You can find out more about those on our website. So thank you very much for tuning in today. And without any further ado, let's take a look at our esteemed panel. First, we have Andy Betourne. Andy is the Sales and Production Control Manager at Precision Castparts, and he's been there for almost 11 years. His focus is the supply chain from materials procurement and product input to final delivery. His undergraduate is in aerospace engineering, and he's a graduate. He will be a graduate and this weekend from our Oregon Executive Program. He's also, and he may tell us a little bit about it, he also played hockey in college. Our next panelist is Kasey Nguyen. Kasey is the Director of Global Quality for Blount International, where he's been for the last 4 years. He leads a global team of managers and engineers to support product development, manufacturing, and sourcing with a specific focus on quality. His undergraduate is in engineering, and he's a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. And he also is graduating from our Oregon Executive Program. Next up is Samantha Enriquez. Samantha is a global operations supply planner at Under Armour in Baltimore. She manages the capacity planning and resolves constraints to ensure on-time delivery while mitigating risk. Her undergraduate is in kinesiology, and she's a graduate of our Master's of Science in Sports Product Management. Next up is David Newell. David is an Assistant Director of Distribution at Oregon Health Science University. He's been there for 12 years. His focus is on maximizing resources of all business partners and creating and leveraging technology, transportation, distribution, and inventory management. He also focuses on strategic planning and operational design for all aspects of the distribution system for OHSU across their 4 campuses. Next up is Bob Schorrock. Bob is the Group President for Chin, the sports footwear manufacturer for Nike, Adidas, Mizuno, and FootJoy. He actually moved from the Group President position this year to be an advisor to the new CEO and President. He formerly was with Reebok and Adidas in areas of product development, costing, and sourcing. He has a technology degree, and he's a big supporter of higher education here at the University of Oregon. Next up, Ozgur Yazicigil. He'll have to tell us how to pronounce his last name. It's a beautiful last name from Turkey. No problem. Ozgur is currently the Senior Supply Chain Research and Development Engineer, 15 years experience at Intel. He manages suppliers with a focus on technical and quality aspects of the supply chain. Now his focus is on finding supply chain solutions to enable Intel's research and development and pathfinding groups to create innovative solutions. His education is in engineering as well, and he's also a member of our executive MBA program, graduating this year. And finally, Rachel Noah. Rachel is the Director of Finance and Operation at Emerald Performance Materials. She's been a consultant in mergers and acquisitions analysis for a major university with a $40 billion endowment. She specializes in procurement, productivity, improvements, sales and operations planning, and managing working capital. She's also an executive program graduate. So, boy, what an esteemed panel. So I always tell the panel, anytime that I'm responsible for asking the questions, that I start with a softball and then the questions will get harder. So Bob, why don't you kick this off for us? And just a quick hello, where are you and how are you?
Thanks, Ellen, and hello, everyone. Great to be on the panel. Looking forward to discussing supply chain today. I'm Bob Schorrock. I'm currently in Hong Kong, and I'm very well, and looking forward to the day where we can all start traveling and seeing each other face to face again.
Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha, and I am currently in California, back at home. So I was very fortunate enough to come home from Baltimore prior to everything getting a little before stay-at-home orders started. So I'm here in California in the sun, enjoying working from home, but I'm doing really well.
Okay, Oscar, this is your chance to get back at me. Forget the next last name.
Okay, no worries, Ellen. So this is Ozgur Yazicigil. People go by Ozgur. I am currently at home in Portland, Oregon, and it's around my 11th week working from home, and I am making the most out of every time and moment I have here. But I do definitely miss the hallway conversations that we've been away from recently.
Great, Andy.
Yep, Andy Betourne here. Right now I'm in my home in Portland, Oregon, but as of about the last month, I've been back in the office 100% full time. So it's starting to feel a little bit more normal, but in general, it's an interesting world out there. I can say things are going pretty well. I'm definitely very excited about graduating this weekend and being able to step into the next chapter.
Great, thanks. Kasey.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Ellen. And I'm here at my home in Sandy, Oregon, working from home currently, but I'm in the office probably 1 to 2 days a week for exec meetings. And unlike Bob, for somebody who travels all the time, I'm very excited to be grounded and very excited to not be traveling. So happy to be here today and looking forward to discuss.
Super, thanks so much. Rachel.
So hi, everyone. I'm here in my home in Ridgefield, Washington, and doing really well. I actually spent some time in the field this week in Eastern Washington and narrowly avoided a rattlesnake, my first encounter out in the field. So feeling pretty good about not getting bit by a rattlesnake and also being healthy and graduation this weekend.
Super, thanks, Rachel. And then David Newell. David just sent a note. He had to step out just for a minute. Remember, he's with OHSU and they were having an emergency meeting. And of course, we want him to take that one, and he'll be stepping back in hopefully in about 15 minutes. And we can ask him some of these questions then. So, well, let's go without any further ado. Let's go ahead with the questions. Andy, I'm going to pick on you first. And then after Andy, I'll ask the rest of you the same question. So Andy, how do you define success in the supply chain? And has that changed because of the current situation?
Thanks, Ellen. For those that aren't familiar with Precision Castparts, we are primarily an aerospace supplier of metal components My facility here in Portland also has a significant amount of our product tied to land-based power generation. And I'm sure, as most of you are aware, the aviation industry has taken quite a turn in the last few months as a result of COVID-19. But I think in general, the metrics that we would measure ourselves to and define success in our supply chain are relatively unchanged. It really starts with our customer delivery performance. My particular facility has 5 primary customers. We measure monthly scorecards to metrics like on-time performance, number of quality concessions that need to be submitted, and we try and make sure that, you know, it's never going to be 100%, but we're always moving the scorecard north. Moving back from that is internal metrics for our production. We measure that daily through line walks on the production floor, trying to level load the shop from all the way at the start of the process until shipment, and managing that through our supervisors and operations leadership. And then we have critical raw materials in the forms of ceramic cores and alloy procurement, and managing our suppliers to their delivery commitments. So those are really what metrics we're looking at daily and weekly, and that has remained relatively unchanged. I do think that in this environment, some of the focus has maybe shifted a little bit from ship everything possible and get it out as fast as you can to do it in a manner that makes sense and is cost effective and is both timely for our customers and also makes sense for our plant from a operation standpoint.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to go on the other side of the world and ask Bob you this same question. I think Asia, you guys saw this before we did. I'm just kind of curious on what's going on there.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Yeah, as a company, we measure success based on some values that our founder gave us in 1986, which really talks about how we work with people, how we look at our whole ecosystem, and manage all of that. So how we will measure success in the future doesn't really change through what's happened in the past months, where we put our emphasis and how we act in certain parts of our supply obviously is changing. We were affected early. I think fortunately, if there is a fortunate, this started during Chinese New Year. And prior to Chinese New Year every year, we all look at our supply because we know that the vendor base is down for a period of time. So we always prepare to have that dead period and have a buffer of materials coming out of Chinese New Year. And so that helped us manage continuity through a period where China was closed down. Most of our manufacturing being in Vietnam and Indonesia, we've done a lot of work to localize supply as well. So we will continue to measure our supply chain, very similar metrics to what Andy's just mentioned, but really looking at how we better localize, how we can streamline that supply chain, which allows us to then remain flexible to that changing demand. There's obviously been very important in the past months as the world has developed and changed. There's been priorities reset and so on, and really to be able to flex to that.
Great, thanks, Bob. Next up, Rachel. We've all seen the impact that this has had on the financial market. So give us a little glimpse of that.
Yeah, so actually I was thinking about this question, and metrics, I think in supply chain, we always use those on-time delivery and customer satisfaction and making sure we're managing inventory. But when I think about how I really manage success in supply chain, it's about the quality of the relationships that I have globally. And that is with our customers and with our suppliers, and the amount of trust that we have with one another, knowing that as we sequence through events like this, or just standard, everyday business pre-COVID, the relationships that you maintain are really a really strong indicator of how successful you are. And what I have seen change is people leaning into those relationships. And when you can reach out to a supplier and ask them, you know, and have a really good quality conversation on how are we going to get through this together, I think that, and I'm hopeful that that's going to continue and actually grow as a stronger attribute of how things move forward post-COVID.
Excellent. Thanks, Rachel. Ozgur, this is you must have a big impact going on at Intel now.
Yeah, it's no small feat to manage 2,100 customers through 16,000 suppliers and doing business in 46 countries. We are already going into this. Last year, Intel has been struggling to keep up with the demand and orders. So we were actually really well prepared in November, where we set up a company has set up a war room to make sure that we delivered and continue to deliver to our customers. So in that respect, to Bob and Andy's point, the success criteria of delivering the products that our customers want on time has not changed. But what we were able to take advantage of this, and one advantage also Intel had is one of our factories is in Dalian, China. And we were quickly able to leverage the learnings coming out of how this pandemic was impacting Intel and its business. So in that sense, the war room morphed into was combined with a pandemic leadership team that we set up 15 years ago to deal with the SARS epidemic. So in that sense, having these structures in place and being able to already see what's coming ahead gave us the leverage to continue to run our operations. And also to Rachel's point, these are the times during crises like this, relying on the relationships matters even more. So, and this is where you could recoup the dividends of that investment. And in that sense, we've had to continue to lean in and work with our suppliers and be creative to deliver to our customers, which we've been doing quite well for now.
Thanks, Ozgur. Kasey, kind of a different perspective, I'm sure, coming out of your company.
That's, you know, in some instances, very similar to both what Rachel and Ozgur just mentioned. You know, our primary goal as a company, aside from creating shareholder value, is to help our customers get the job done right. And from a supply chain standpoint, because we both manufacture and purchase for resale, we have internal and we have external customers. And like I said, as Rachel mentioned, one of the keys to keeping all of that flowing and making sure you can deliver to your internal customers is the vitality of the supply base that you have and those key partnerships that exist, and making sure that you maintain and nurture those throughout not only their beginning, but through the life of the partnership. And that's how we tend to look at it. We apply a lot of resources into supplier development and really focus on lack of supplier turnover, specifically because they underline the ability to maintain the quality levels, the on-time delivery levels, and your ability to manufacture your products. And so for us, we've, you know, I think prior to the COVID-19 situation, we put a lot of emphasis on that, and it certainly paid dividends for us after the situation, and we've not lost anyone in that critical space at this point in time. And so we're very proud of that and very happy about that, and it certainly allows us to achieve our goal of helping our customers get the job done right in the long run.
Excellent. Congratulations, Kasey. Sounds good. Samantha, how's Under Armour doing?
Hey, everyone has said it like pretty spot on, and it's like that right around over here as well. Just making sure like our on-time delivery to our customers, we're hitting those delivery dates and like those launches. But now we're like, it definitely has switched the focus of how are we all coming together and getting all these demands and wanting to cancel all these orders. Like, how are we working together so everyone is getting the same benefit? So just like Rachel said, we're all kind of leading in together and making sure that we're keeping great relationships with our strategic partners and how we're helping them, because now that a lot of the retailers and our like wholesale and DTCs, like we're we're not selling as much, obviously, because we're closed. So we're really relying on our e-commerce. And so we're not buying as much, but we're still trying to help our strategic partners out in like the Middle East and Latin America and Asia to help them keep flow and get the production lines continuing to go as smooth as possible. So we're still trying to help level and flow our product and our numbers to help keep everyone happy. So it's been a challenge, but everyone, like Rachel has said, as long as we're all leaning in and supporting each other and just giving each other advice, how Asia kind of went through this beforehand, they've been telling us like, it's going to get better. Like we all have to work together. So we're going to we're going to get out of it at the end of the day. But our number one priority is always our customers and making sure they're getting the product that they still want during this time. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Samantha. David, I'll have you answer that question as well.
Great, thanks, Alan. So yeah, so I work at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. Historically, our group has taken a lot of pride, and defined success on having the items available at the right time, at the right place, and at the cost. Today's world, just getting the product is a success in influencing critical clinical uses due to restrictions and availability. Sourced carefully, but paying much more than what we've normally paid is becoming kind of the new normal. Trying to leverage current processes as much as we can, using our tools with value analysis, who should be a part of the decision-making process as we look to deploy products that are a little bit different. There's, definitely constraints with, state restrictions, Oregon Health Association guidelines that we have to, play with and ensure that we're in compliance, of course, and getting back to different level of operation. I think I'll pause there. Go ahead, Ellen.
Great, thanks, David. All right, I think we're ready for our next question. And Ozgur, I'm going to ask you this one first, and then I'll follow up with each of you. So Ozgur, what has surprised you, and perhaps Intel, what has surprised you the most over the last 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so Ellen, I'm going to answer that question by tying into the first question. So one of the good problems that we have is, despite the challenges going into this, I said we're having a hard time keeping up with demand. Well, with working from home and remote working, that just got amplified. So in that sense, the demand our customers and the society needs on Intel's product has just gone up. But and in addition to that, with the restrictions of government and operating factories, obviously has its own challenges. So I think what really surprised, in a positive way surprised us, is the resiliency that the Intel employees have along with our suppliers. Safety has been always number one for Intel, and we continue to keep safety paramount for everybody. And the ability to be able to come up with different solutions and getting the job done, and just having that resilient, out of the box thinking was really essential. And it, in that sense, has not. I think we've surprised everybody in terms of what we achieved with the situation we're in. So supply resiliency and just working in together and just coming up with that collaborative mindset and working together was my biggest positive surprise.
Excellent, thank you. Rachel.
Sure. So I think that resiliency thing is key, Ozgur. I think that when we look at that, it's got to be a basis for how we measure things. And one of the things that actually surprised me more than maybe it wasn't so much of a surprise, was kind of the ill preparedness for a lot of major companies in the areas of liquidity management. Companies are running out of money. They can't pay their suppliers. They can't pay their logistics companies. customers are not paying. And that's a problem that has a cascading and pretty profound impact. And I think, in the next 3 to 6 months, we're probably going to see some pretty serious consequences of that. But how do we prepare for that in the regular everyday? I think it's really about, doing diligence with who we're choosing to strategically align with. Are our suppliers, are we a meaningful customer for them? Or are we just, a small guy that they really, we don't matter to them too much. And that may change the way that relationships are formed and built and the types of contracts that we enter into for supply agreements. Things like take or pay, like, if I make something and you ordered it and you didn't, contract typing, we can have a take or pay agreement. But if you can't pay and you can't take it because your warehouse is full, because your downstream customer isn't taking it, that take or pay agreement is really meaningless at that point. And so I think the biggest thing is kind of looking at where to strategically align yourself and who matters. Customers, which are your customers, profiling your A customers, and who are your A suppliers? Who can you be with and who can you be without? And being really straightforward and making sure that your organization understands what those relationships look like.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel. Bob.
Thanks, Helen. What surprises the most? I mean, I think there's been a lot of surprises, but I think really following on from really what Ozgur said is that the resourcefulness, the resilience of our whole organization. I mean, we have 70,000 people dotted over throughout Asia, and we've managed to keep everything working right through this crisis. We've had to change working practices. We've had to change the layout of factories to ensure and improve social distancing inside the factories. But the relationship working with trade unions, working with local governments, and all of our employees and all the stakeholders, it's been super. People have really pulled together in a way that perhaps not as strongly as before. I think we always had a good relationship, but people have really stepped up to make sure that we're able to perform at the best level possible in the circumstances that we have. So it's been very, very encouraging to see people pulling together in that way.
Thank you, Bob. Samantha.
Thanks, Ellen. So being in the industry just for about 2 years now, being at Under Armour, never would I have thought we would go through something like this, and especially being on the supply chain aspect of things. So I feel like what's also been very surprising is that even like our top management team is they're all taking it day by day. It's like no one really knows what's going to happen next, and there's only so far out you can plan. But day to day, we're all being reassured from our top management saying like, we've all never gone through this. Like it's literally, we're all in this together. And so just like hearing that, and we get updates almost every week, and just being part of something like this, that we have an opportunity as like newcomers being new into this industry, like we get to be innovative to see how we can help change like what we're doing our day to day. And you think that like you're being like that we're lean, but there's so much more lean you can do. Not saying that you're not, but like there's so much more, and you can totally like streamline it even more. And this gives you an opportunity to try those things. Like it's, if you don't try or try something new, especially during a time like this, I feel like it's like very important right now to be very vocal and be over communicative and talking to your suppliers and just being very resourceful with what you have as a team right now, because we're not gaining employees currently or anything like that, and just being very fortunate that we currently still have a job and we can be part of this big difference. So when things like this do happen, and whenever hopefully they don't happen again, but you never know what's going to happen. So everything literally has been so surprising to me, at least, just being in the industry for 2 years and just kind of planning and going. And yeah, it's been very surprising.
Thank you, Samantha. Excellent. David.
Yeah, I got to tell you, at OHSU Teaching Hospital, you know, there's priorities in all of the missions that we serve: research, academics, and of course healthcare. And what surprised me is how quickly our organization aligned to serving the healthcare mission and taking care of patients, and quickly adapting facilities for incoming patients, protecting staff, as quickly as possible and as safe as possible. I think, like Ozgur said, and Bob touched on it too, just how the human side of it, how willing people are to step into non-traditional roles, non-work areas. The donations from people from non-traditional sources that we've been receiving, and people have inquired about what we are taking on. It's just been amazing to see the rallying of just the human side of the actions. It surprised me how quickly our organization has adapted teleworking, health, both of those initiatives. They have obviously both immediate and potentially long-term benefits. Of course, more patients seeing, less physical space utilized, lower exposure to others that are sick. Of course, on the employee side, teleworking, transportation, parking, office space allows us to think differently about how we use the space. I think, when I continue to think about just this whole event, a lot of it's around PPE. Before this COVID, I'm not sure I ever really heard PPE talked about in the news, and you hear about it all the time. And for us, it's a 4-cent item that's completely disrupted our institution, and of course beyond, and just the access to face masks, isolation gowns, those sorts of things. Typically, the supply chain, as this group knows, is typically behind the scenes activity, and now we're at the forefront of discussion. So instead of it being a back end, how does the supply chain support the strategy? Some of the questions now are coming around, how actually supply chain can dictate the organizational direction.
David, you have to tell everybody, how many masks does OHSU use each day?
It's a tricky number. We've definitely put in conservation efforts to try to drive the usage down. We do use disposable masks, as a lot of healthcare institutions do, and it's over 20,000 masks a day that are utilized.
That's remarkable. Thank you. Kasey.
Yeah, I think certainly for us, or at least for myself, one of the things that was most surprising was our ability to shift our operating priorities as an organization. And I think that does stem from great leadership. We focused a lot originally on safety, and that was no doubt with everybody. Safety continued being one of our top operating priorities. And Rachel mentioned this as well: cash flow and liquidity second. And then third, which I really appreciate about the company as well, is we didn't stop looking at opportunities. So our third operating priority became commerce, right? How do we increase commerce, and how do we take advantage of this time where one of the other things that surprised me, and Rachel mentioned this as well, is how poorly some large companies have prepped themselves for situations such as this. And it's opened the door for us having a great global footprint to take market share from competition at this point in time. And so as they've been unable to fulfill the customer need, we've been able to step in and take that, which has been an opportunity to their detriment, unfortunately for them, and fortunately for us. But our ability to not just look at, okay, we need to conserve cash and stop every ancillary function. We've kept some ancillary functions moving. There is still some new product development. There is still some interesting things that we're working on in R&D, all that drive toward cash flow and liquidity. And so we've been selective about those projects and focusing on those. And I was really surprised, again, from a pretty global organization that sometimes argues a lot about what we should be prioritizing, how quickly we were able to get behind those three operating priorities with minimal fight and some pretty decent execution that's resulted in some good results for us. And so we're definitely happy about that. I was surprised to see it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Last one on this question is Andy.
Yeah, I can certainly echo what several others have talked about in terms of resiliency and being able to adapt quickly. I can't think of any other event or anything that's come up in my career here at PCC where the entire company has become so unified on a issue and gotten, you know, 160 facilities and 30,000 employees, on board with this new normal. So I think that's been pretty impressive. But one of the other things that I think is kind of surprising is our company is very, very contract based, maybe more so than the relationships. And in this environment, I've been a little surprised to see that we're backing off of that. We have a lot of contracts that would, maybe allow us to ship, product that was launched based on frozen schedules. But if they're not going to be going into an engine and not going on an airplane because airlines aren't ordering these planes, it doesn't help the whole supply chain. So, I think we're doing our part. We're asking our suppliers to do their part to support the right long-term actions, and that might mean some financial impact short term, but I feel like it's been a good thing to reduce the strain on the relationships and support long-term objectives for the supply chain.
Excellent, thank you. All right, our next question, and Samantha, I'm going to ask you this one first. So, and then I'll follow with the rest of our esteemed panel. So, team, I just gave you a crystal ball. What is it telling you about what we're going to see over the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years for your company? Samantha, you have to take this hard ball first.
Oh, how we love crystal balls. So obviously, I believe for like this first year is honestly keeping all of our employees safe, and that goes all the way from beginning to end, like from our product teams, our customers, our suppliers, and just us employees in general, and just how are we all going to get back, or what is going to be the new norm for us. So I honestly think that's how this first year is going to be looking for us. But within the next 5-10 years, what I foresee would be really focusing on who our customers, strategic customers really are, and how we are defining our long-term relationships with them. And I know a big aspect right now with us in global operations is our demand teams, and how that's been like a huge, I wouldn't say opportunity for us. I would say opportunity for us, and how we're going to see our demand team and our forecasting team, and working with us as global supply planners, how that's going to work out within the next 5-10 years as they're starting to implement them even more, and they're becoming more strategic partners with us within my role. So that's another thing. But I also believe retail is going to be very, very different, and you're already starting to see it firsthand. So it'll be interesting to see how we start implementing or once we start opening more of our stores, how we're going to do that and how we're going to accomplish, because we still want that customer service. We still want to be with our customers and be front and right there with them, but it's going to be different. And I feel like new businesses, it's going to be a completely new way of doing business for new starters that are going to be coming up within the next 5-10 years. So it'll be very interesting, but it's going to be a challenge, and people have to be very, very innovative.
Excellent, thank you, Sam. Next up, let's go with Ozgur.
So, Ellen, I believe it's during crises like these when people's and companies' true purpose and face really show. So in that sense, I think it's really important for companies to know what their purpose is and why they exist. In that sense, for Intel, our purpose is to create world-changing technology that enriches the lives of every person on Earth. So in that respect, based on this purpose and how to do this, I believe we have the right approach to enable technology, because the current pandemic just showed that technology has even a bigger role to play and could change people's lives in a more positive way. In terms of the future, work from home, I think several companies have demonstrated that they could be productive and cut significant costs by working from home. So in that respect, I do not see work from home going away. Probably corporate offices, I would be worried about commercial real estate in order to still get people together, because nothing really beats that face-to-face time being on a whiteboard. I would see probably a lot of hub offices, satellite offices showing up, or people more utilizing leasing daily offices and spaces to get together. In terms of the supply chain fundamentals, days of inventory, your BCP, those are, I think companies need to even put more focus and effort on their business continuity plans and really understand where the next disaster is going to come from and be ready for that. And then I think anybody who knows this in supply chain, at the end of the day, your supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We've, as a single special screwdriver could bring billions of dollars worth of a factory down to a screeching halt. So in that sense, really understanding where companies' weak links are is going to be essential. And to wrap this up, if a company is not already looking into data analytics and AI, this, in my mind, the last opportunity for them to seriously jump on understanding and harnessing data analytics into their operations and really trying to be more effective in utilizing where their weakest links are and how they could continue to improve to, at the end of the day, to deliver their customers, which is an unchanged goal.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. Rachel.
Yeah, wow, it's like Ozgur and I were like totally vibing there. I mean, Ozgur, my notes, did I send them to you before we started? Seriously. So I was going to start off with Class A office space. Man, if you're in Class A office space real estate investing and you haven't already taken a strong look at your position in that portfolio, you're too late at this point. And I think the flexible office and work, and there's going to be a whole burst of new businesses around the way that we collaborate, because we have been forced to prove something that we thought we knew. And especially as we are changing to the, millennials being in the leadership positions in the workforces, that we can do this at a distance, and we can do this flexibly, and we can do this with strong work-life balances and still get those great relationships. We don't have to commute 75 minutes each way to sit in cubicle land to be successful. So I think that's a big one, and I think organizations of all sizes are going to be seeing that. And how we do the work is really not going to change. How we get together is going to change. I mean, we're doing this meeting on Zoom. It's so great, right? Normally we'd have a big panel and maybe some snacks. So the second thing is supply chain. Supply chain's kind of always been the back behind the scenes function. They don't have a strong seat at the table oftentimes. You have the financial leadership and you have commercial sales or demand generation activities that are very, very strong. And supply chain sometimes gets treated as being like a necessary evil. And I think that this situation is highlighting that there's a lot of very strong career paths that are being generated in supply chain management and making sure that these things are coming. And I think, Ozgur, you also hit on critical spares. Critical spares for your factory, critical spares for your equipment and machinery, making sure that you know what's going to bring you down. And, I'm sure, David, your 4-cent mask or whatever it is that you're looking at for the hospital pieces, what are those pieces that are really there? So data and analytics, again, Ozgur just got me. I just did a massive Power BI rollout, a global Power BI rollout, and how we're taking demand data and pulling that in and determining what our supply and inventory position and driving it into MRP forecasting at a raw materials level to determine our supply stream. If we hadn't done that, we would have been in a really, really poor position. So if your company is not going down the path of data analytics and AI, that's something that you should strongly be pursuing at this time.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. Kasey.
Yeah, I think you know, in the immediate future, what we'd likely see, and maybe potentially should see, is companies becoming aggressively more lean and focused on that. I think this situation has maybe opened the eyes, or hopefully should be opening the eyes of organizations to see how much can get done with limited resources. And we may have, you know, like many organizations through time, they continue to bloat a little bit, and then they kind of go back, and they bloat a little more, and then they kind of go back. But I think as you know, the top management of organizations realizes how much can actually still get done, even with a starkly reduced workforce. You're going to see operations becoming more and more and more lean, and probably more pressure being put on the employees who remain. I think that's going to be an interesting thing, and I expect that throughout the course of the next 5 years, not just in the immediate future. With what you know, Ozgur was talking about in terms of leaning onto technology, I think it's going to be a big thing for business travel as well. I know ourselves as well are looking at like HoloLens that Microsoft is putting out, and a lot of technologies like that, where it can kind of put you into a 3D holographic video representation of a third-party location. And so I expect us to take, I know we're looking into it already, to do factory visits, supplier visits, audits, to take advantage of technology and again, become more lean, reduce travel budget, and keep cash flow high. I think there will be, I think there's certainly an opportunity in that. And then within the next 10 years, I'm curious to know, as we do a lot of this remote work and work from home, and people spend more time in their houses, if this whole shift that we've kind of done recently to a la carte services and subscription things starts to backtrack a little bit, when people have a desire to actually get back out and walk into a brick and mortar store when they're sitting at home a lot of the time. So I'll be, you know, though it's extremely popular right now, 10 years from now, I wonder if we'll evolve a little bit further backwards into an old model where we have the desire to get out and actually experience the world in real life, so to speak. And so, yeah, I think aggressive nature toward being lean, though that's always been a key buzzword, you know, for the last 50, 60 years. I think we're going to see a lot more of that very, very soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Kasey. Andy.
Yeah, I definitely agree a lot of what Kasey just mentioned there. In our industry, there's going to be a lot of consolidation in the whole aerospace market. The companies that remain are going to be forced to drive their costs down, and the focus on volume and output is definitely going to shift more towards, you know, how do you manufacture in a lean setting. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on the technology side in terms of automation and being able to drive down operating costs through technology. So I think that's kind of the short term of what I see happening. I think over the next 5 years, aviation and travel in general will get back to some normalcy, but I think it's going to look very different. I think the travel experience, whether it's getting to an airport, what the airport terminal looks like, what the layout in a plane looks like, I think that's going to be significantly different, you know, 5+ years down the road from what we've come to expect today, and really how it's been for a couple of decades. There hasn't been, you know, substantial changes. And I think that this type of pandemic is just the thing to really start moving the needle there. I don't know what that'll look like, but I expect it to be different. And I think that means there's a lot of opportunities, you know, for new companies to come up and crawl into that space. And then potentially for you know, existing industrial companies like Precision to take advantage of it. And then looking 10 years out, you know, I don't think my crystal ball goes quite that far, but I think everybody's touched on a couple good points. There's just going to be a different work-life balance, a different method of commuting, and it might not be, you know, being on site. It might be virtual, and I think that the world is going to be moving more and more that direction.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. David.
So interesting. So great question. if you have the time and the ability to really process this question, really think about the future, take advantage of it right now, and really, try to dream out what it looks like. I've been a little bit head down in operations and kind of what our current state's been. So when we're starting to think about, obviously what happened over the last 3 months or so and what the next year looks like, healthcare is, there's some seasonality to it. We're expecting the seasonal flu to pick up, right at the, October timeframe in the U.S. and stuff. So that's going to continue to strain some of the same supplies that we've been looking at, that we've been utilizing for COVID. So, it's partly how do we kind of assess where we're at there, and then understand what the new normal is, as we understand the supply chain is going to be constrained in the next 12, 18 months, just on the products that we're already consuming. So definitely challenges there for us to continue to overcome. I think when we look, when I look out, and think about lean, and I totally agree. I think companies are going to continue to look at, what their priorities are, and what's the minimal amount that it takes to move the needle in a positive direction. I think lean is going to be important. I think it'll be a best practice, of course. I think when it comes to what's typically been viewed as waste in what lean management looks at, such as inventory, overproduction, I think that we'll have a different perspective, as appropriate preparedness will need to be balanced. Inventory decisions that may have been based on turns or the impacts of the balance sheet, that's going to change. I think there's now value being placed on being prepared, being ready, not only ready with inventory that you have that can be utilized, but also how you are ready to change over. If you're manufacturing, how you change from one part to another part to adapt to the immediate needs of what's happening. I think what in healthcare, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with supplies. We use a lot of disposable supplies in healthcare, and as those costs go up, right now we're kind of seeing increases. Will reusable supplies become more of a thing in healthcare, and how does that change? How does equipment change? How does decontamination? I think there's a lot of different things happening out there with UV lights and reprocessing and things that are being looked at differently than they once were. And I could see that having a big impact on the future of healthcare.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Last up on this question, Bob.
Thanks, Ellen. Hard to follow all that great feedback. I think that short term, obviously business continuity, risk mitigation. People are really going to be taking a step back and looking at what happened and how do we better prepare and better protect ourselves in the future. There's going to be a lot of change and an economic reset, I think, within the next 12 months. I think as we look forward, there's a lot of dynamics going to happen. Climate change is still happening. We've forgotten a little bit about it during the past few months, but I think carbon and climate will be a huge factor for most industries over the coming 10 years, and something that's going to come right back into play. I think that COVID has probably accelerated a move probably towards more regionalization of trade. And if trade regionalizes rather than being truly global, then that has a massive impact on how it all works. And the use of technologies, increasing automation are going to be absolutely vital to ensure that the people can get the goods that they're looking for at that moment in time. So I think we're at the start of a very big rebalance that actually started a few years ago with things moving away from China into other parts of the world. But I do feel 5-10 years from now, we're going to see quite a big shift. New generation coming with different expectations, climate change playing a big role, and obviously trade patterns shifting. So technology use to figure out what's going on, and then the use of technology to enable that to happen is going to be vital. So I do think we're at the start of some profound changes in supply. And crystal ball, yeah, it would be great if we can really see where it's going and make sure that we're ready for it, or even lead that. But I do think that this is kind of accelerating conversations and the start of some significant shifts that we're going to see.
One thing, Ellen, I want to add to Bob's point around the environmental impact. Just working from home and having less number of cars, it's amazing how much of a positive impact is made in terms of the sky just being clearer here in the Portland area. So yeah, we'll have to continue to think about that as we work on solutions.
Excellent. Yeah. My goodness, I have learned a tremendous amount from the 7 of our amazing panelists today about the supply chain. I just took a shot at kind of 5 themes around what we heard. And I'm sure there were 500 of them, but let's see if they agree or not. I think number 1 was optimism. You know, when we put together this panel, my first thought was, okay, do we really want to talk about the supply chain? We don't talk about the supply chain now, you know, so just a tremendous amount of optimism about everything from taking market share from competitors to relationships, leveraging. You know, I was unbelievably impressed with the level of optimism all of you represented from your 7 companies. Number 2, and I felt like, I think we all feel like Rachel really teed this up for all of us, and that was partnerships. And we also heard from Ozgur on just the employees' partnerships. You know, as you can imagine, overnight, companies had to tell their employees, you're not going to come here anymore. You're going to work from home. You know, the opportune word work, you're going to work from home. You know, and I think it's the same thing that we've seen with each of our students, is that your partnerships with us here at the University of Oregon, when in order to keep all of you safe and to keep your loved ones safe, we had to ask you to do the same thing. But I think in the industry and in each of these 7 examples today, we had an opportunity to see that their partnerships and the strength of their partnerships are what are going to sustain them through what's going on today. Number 3 was prepare. And I think that we heard a lot of examples of times in companies and partners that were not prepared. I put preparation into 2 buckets. The first is short term. And we heard Samantha talk about how, you know, kind of hurry up offense to make sure that you're doing the right things at the right time as quickly as you can. We also heard from our team about the long-term planning. And I think that we heard the purpose. I think Kasey and Ozgur, you both spoke to purpose, you know, like, why are we doing this? And I think that that's the question that we all have to ask ourselves, because we're doing this as a community. We're doing it, you know, for each other, you know, but to be reminded on what our purpose is as a student or as an employee for a company or running a company today. The next point, and it's my number 4, and it kind of encapsulates a lot of what all of you told us today, and that is the new normal. You know, everybody keeps on saying, well, when we get back. And what I heard the 7 of you tell us is that it's not about going back. It's about going forward. And you gave us a glimpse of how your companies are taking what you're learning now and advantaging your company as you move your company forward. So that new normal, and I can't remember which one of you said that, but I thought that was perfect. And then finally, and I felt like this was a theme kind of throughout the supply chain, and I think, Rachel, you said that supply chain is not very sexy, and we have a lot of students on, and sometimes they're looking at product marketing before they would be looking at operations. But to really understand that operations, supply chain is about innovation. And we heard about AI today. We heard about the fact that this is an opportunity that will allow these companies to reinvent how they supply their products to their companies. David talked about, and the reason I had him mention how many masks that they use each day is not in any way to embarrass OHSU. Is that we had to know that number is because we were very proud of ourselves because we were going to send 100 masks over to OHSU. And then David told me how many they use a day. we weren't feeling quite as proud of how many we were sending over. But the fact that they're looking at things differently now, you know, I mean, does everything we use, does it have to be disposable? Is there a different way for us to look at that? You know, and I think that each of you, as you look at what you're doing every day during this crisis, look at how you can innovate. Because I think we are, without a doubt, we're going to get to the other side of this crisis. And we're going to want to be proud of the way we behaved during this crisis. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you everyone, all of our students that joined us today. Thank you also for everybody that joined us on WebEx. Have a good afternoon and go Ducks, right?